Why doesn't anybody like gouache?
Illustrations by me.
So I've done a few gouache videos and they all do terrible. So I'm not going to learn from my mistakes and I'm going to do another one because I think it's one of the greatest mediums you could ever use. And I'm going to show you why today. You know, you can go over an area over and over again, and if you don't like it, you just put more paint on it, more gouache on it, blend it until it gets to the point where you like it. You can change it, go back and forth over and over again. I'm going to show you. I'm going to put some down and I'm going to do a background and put some over the top and you'll see how it layers. And then I'm going to put some more on top of that and then start to blend it and more and just put a bunch of, you'll see it. This is going to take a while to develop, so I hope you have some patience. I'll try to talk to you about some things that are a little bit more entertaining than my normal nonsense, but I just want you to try it because you can reactivate it. This is not, I don't know how many times I have to say it. I don't know where the confusion is. I get it because it's called gouache, but acrylic gouache is not gouache. Acrylic gouache is acrylic paint that just has a matte finish. Regular gouache is, you reactivate it. It's just like watercolor, except it's opaque. It's more opaque because the particles should be bigger. Now, some places, they do it so that it actually has a whitening agent in it or a thickening agent in it. But if you get good quality gouache, which I'm not using here, I'm not saying that it's bad quality. What I'm saying is there's probably some fillers in this one. This is the Arteza gouache, but it works very well. It works just like every other gouache. I have no problems with it, no trouble with it. It works fine. I'm actually a fan of their gouache. I like their, usually with gouache, I use the white or I use the Daniel Smith watercolor that I mix with the white gouache, M-gram white gouache. That's what I usually use. And then I mix it and then put it on there. But that's not what I did here. I just used the Arteza gouache. Some people are going to use cheaper things. The gouache, you can't go too cheap with gouache. If you get that like Reeves or whatever, that's crap. Throw that in the garbage where it belongs. But the Arteza gouache is pretty inexpensive and still very good. So I would, yeah, go ahead and use that. Or take your watercolor palette, just buy one tube of M-gram white gouache and mix it with your watercolor and mix whatever colors that you already have that you know you're going to like. That's what I usually do. I didn't want to do that in this one because I wanted to make it more accessible to people who are going to buy lesser expensive stuff. And it's fine. It works wonderful. You'll see. We'll go through all the details, I think, if I don't get sidetracked on something like I usually do. All right, let's get into it. Okay, so one thing I didn't mention is that the only thing that I really don't like about the Arteza gouache, they have one giant flaw, and that is that you cannot buy individual tubes. At least at this point in time, I've never found any individual tubes unless you go on like eBay or something and someone buys the big 60 set and they're trying to divvy it up and make extra money off of you. They charge you more per tube and they sell them singly or something like that. But really, you can't go to any other art supply store or anything like that, even the Arteza site itself, and get some, just a tube that you ran out of. You have a big set of 60, you use up your favorite color, you want to go get that color, you're out of luck. You can't do it. You got to find another set, and sometimes it's the full 60 set. Now, it's inexpensive enough that you may be willing to do that. Because all in all, the gouache is not terrible. It's not as, I don't know, some people swear by this gouache or that gouache or whatever, but it seems to be okay. I've used it several times and I seem to like it. It doesn't do anything bad. It acts the way that I want it to act for gouache. It's not like, I gotta get some different gouache because this isn't doing it for me. Now, I will say, though, I think some people are so critical of everything. They're like, oh, I've done 3,000 paintings with this gouache, and out of my experience, then I know that I like this gouache over this gouache because it acts a little differently. But let me tell you, when you have someone who's not fairly experience with gouache. Maybe they've done less than 100 paintings, let's say less than 50 paintings of gouache, and they try and tell you that they're some kind of expert, that they can tell the difference between all the gouache brands or something. Unless you put them side by side immediately using one after the other, you can't tell the damn thing. There's just, you'd have to use it right in one painting and then immediately use it in the next painting, immediately use the next one, the next painting, and do them one right after another to actually notice much of a difference. For the most part, they act the same. They act very similar. I've used the Holbein gouache. I've used this gouache. I've used watercolor that I made gouache, and they all roughly act the same way. I've used the M-gram gouache. It's all the same. It acts roughly the same. I don't have anything I would say, oh, this is a big disadvantage for this one or a big advantage for this one. The only thing I will say is that if you use just the white tube with your watercolor palette that you already have, mix your own gouache, the only benefit is you know that color and you know what you like about it, what you don't like. You can customize the color a little bit more, and then you just use it that way. And that's a benefit of using just your watercolor as gouache. But when I see like, oh, someone's using a Holbein gouache or someone's using M-gram gouache, or they're using, they say, oh, this one's a little bit smoother, or this one's a little bit covers a little bit better, or something like that. I'm not saying that they're lying to you, that is not true. What I'm saying is it's so little of a difference that you would never notice. If you're just an occasional gouache painter, maybe you do one every month or something like that, you'll never know the difference. You'll just use it, it'll be fine. Unless you get something really cheap, like I was saying, the Reeves, or like a store brand or a crap brand, really like a Crayola gouache or something, I don't know. But anyway, unless you use that stuff, which you will fight to use, and I know that from experience as well. You don't want to use that crap. But if you get a professional, reputable brand, there's not much difference between the Holbein gouache, which is very expensive, and the Arteza gouache, which is much less expensive. Maybe in the end result, even the light fastness on most of them are very decent. I think the Winsor & Newton used to have, they called it designer's gouache, because at one time or another, their gouache was not as light fast or something like that. So it was just for, you create a piece, you scan it, you get the result you want, and that's the end of that, and then you move on. But you're not looking to hold on to it. You're not looking for that to last for the next 50 years. It's just something you were doing, you design it out, and you do it. So that's it. But for the most part, things are pretty much even across the board. The Winsor & Newton now has been, I guess, reformulated, because the ones that I were looking at, that they were very light fast. I didn't see anything. I never used it, but I was looking at buying it, and I never saw anything that was bad about it. But the wonderful thing about gouache is you can keep layering and just keep fixing and going over and fixing. It doesn't tear apart the page, because it actually builds on top of the other layer or blends with the other layer. It never goes right back down to the complete page where you start to dig into the cotton fiber at all, or the pulp, if you use pulp, whatever you use. But gouache will work relatively well on many different surfaces. It's very versatile. Okay, now someone asked, you can blame Becky for this conversation. We're going to go into this, but she was looking forward to me talking about the parts of the brain and how people are lying to you. So I'm going to say this, but you take it for what it is. So, they have all these parts of the brain labeled. They're like, oh, this is the frontal lobe, and this is the temporal lobe, and the occipital lobe, and they break it down into the motor cortex and the somatosensory cortex, all these things, okay? And people are always talking about how, oh, I'm more left-brained, or I'm more right-brained, I'm more creative-brained, I'm more analytical-brained. Listen, that is a bunch of crap. I don't know who said that, but artists keep repeating it like it's a fact. It's not. It's nonsense. It's absolutely a lie. Let me explain this to you. If you are a creative person, You use a creative part of your brain, whatever part that is. I wish I could tell you what side it is or where it is, but really, every time scientists look into the brain, they look at something and they're like, oh, we didn't think it was over there. We thought it was over there. It's not really over there. It's over here now. It's not, it was never there to begin with, but they have no idea. The brain, I'm going to claim from authority here. This is not the way you win an argument, but my sister happens to be a neuroscientist, and she will be the first one to tell you when they look at the brain, they really have no idea what they're looking at. They are really unsure of how things happen in the brain. They have a basic idea, basic understanding, but you can explain that. That's easy. What they don't know is the complexities of the brain. It's not just electrical impulses, it's also chemical. And then how do they work together and which one comes first? And that's it. There's all different things happening, and they don't really, this interacts with this, but only in this circumstance, but not if it does this. And there's so many different complexities of the brain, they have no idea what's happening. So when someone tells you that you're left-brained or you're right-brained or whatever they're telling you, tell them to take that section of the brain and shove it. That's not true. It's not how it works. Let me prove it to you. I'm going to prove this to you, okay? Let's say you're a creative person and you use the creative part of your brain and you come up with all these different creative ideas and things. Okay, if you were not also an analytical person, your creative side would be walking in circles, bumping into the walls. It would serve no purpose for you because you wouldn't be able to analyze shape and width and form and texture and depth and perception. You wouldn't be able to do any of that because that's all analytical. So if you are creative, you are also analytical. You can't be one or the other. You have to be both together. And if you're analytical, you're coming up with different ideas and ways to solve that problem. So you are using the creative part of your brain. Those two parts of your brain go hand in hand. It is not one side or the other. You're not more this side or more that side. You use your whole friggin' brain for everything in your life. And I hate when people do that. They also say the whole, oh, you only use 10% of your brain or whatever they say. No, you use all of your brain. That's how you live. If you weren't using your brain, you'd be dead. You use all of it, and it's just, they don't understand quite how. It's not all at once. It's just different parts at different times, but you use all of it. There's none of your brain that you don't use. You have to use it to live. So just when you hear that kind of stuff, you run, turn around, kick those people in the shit. No, don't kick anyone. I always say those things. You're not allowed to say those things here, but you don't hurt anybody ever. But mentally, you kick them in the shins and run away. Just mentally. Do that in your own head where it's not a crime. But I'm just saying, when you do things, when you hear people and they're trying to tell you about, they try and sound smart. That's what it actually is. They're trying to sound like they know more than they actually know. So they say, oh, do you know that the analytical part of your brain is over here? And if you're more analytical, and if you're more creative, and people who are artists, of course, say, oh, I'm more creative. I'm a creative person. No, if you weren't analytical, you wouldn't be able to be creative. It has to go hand in hand. So that's just a little FYI for you. I just wanted to explain that because maybe some of you had questions about that and you wanted to listen to these other morons on YouTube who are telling you that you only use a certain part of your brain more. That it's all nonsense. It's garbage. They're just saying it. They want you to tell them how smart they are. This is just a lie. It's not true. You don't have to tell me that you think I'm smart. It doesn't matter to me. I just want to pass on the information. I don't care if people think I'm smart or not. You can think I'm an idiot for all I care. But I'm just telling you, you just be careful who you listen to. Don't listen to people that want to sound like they're talking to you, like they know what they're saying. Just question it. That's all. If you just question what you hear, you'll find these things out for yourself, and you don't have to believe that crap anymore. So hopefully you've been watching me paint as I ramble on and rant like a lunatic. And if you have been watching me paint, I just want to say, you can see how many times I've gone over this thing. I put a base layer. First I put the background on, and then I put a layer over it, and you notice it didn't blend. Because I didn't blend it. You actually have to scrub a little bit to get the underlayer to blend. And if you just lay it down but in a quick stroke and just boldly on top, it doesn't really do much. You can just lay it down on top and it'll cover. And then I went in with some like a dark layer. Then I went in with some just plain white. I just used plain white over that. And then I blended it with the color underneath. I actually went back in and scrubbed it a little on that color, and you see that color start to come out. And I made it kind of weird textured, where it was just kind of all jumbled. Then I went back in with more color and more darkness after that, and you just keep going until you're done. And I always have fun with gouache, always. It's one of my favorite mediums because you can do whatever you want. It's never really unsavable. You can just go over the whole thing all over again, flat if you want, and turn it into nothing again if you want, and then start over. That never really kind of makes any difference. You can pretty much do what you want. Maybe not like starting on fresh paper, but you can pretty much bend it and mold it however you want. It's like having a piece of clay. You just shape it the way you want, and that's how it works. So thumbs up the video if you are going to try gouache with all of your brain, not just be a moron and try and walk around in circles and bump into walls. With your creative side, you're going to use the analytical side. You're going to try and figure out how to do things and enjoy it a little bit, and use your creative side to bring yourself joy. That's the part of it. So that's about it for me. I'm going to go. I'll see you in the next one.